And if you look at anything that is traded in the U.S. market in the North Atlantic countries, where values are put into place, these big markets where you fetch other customers, these big markets where you raise finance, everything that is value around you is fixed on paper, and it's property paper. And therefore, if you don't have that paper, you are not going to be able to move ahead. The second thing that is necessary is business organizations. Now, most business organizations in Latin America are, as a matter of fact, as they're called in Mexico, and I have the authority of the Mexican authorities to say this, are institutions that are called personas físicas con actividad empresarial. These are physical persons with entrepreneurial activity. So if somebody came around and said, are they informal? The reply would probably be, they're not. They have been registered as physical persons with entrepreneurial activity. But then ask yourself the following question. Good, you've got an enterprise. Now, is that enterprise physically a separate organization from your family? No, it's not, because it doesn't allow you to form a hierarchy. We all came in on planes today. And when we came in on planes, the first thing, as you know, when you get a plane is you go to your travel agent, they give you a ticket. Then you go to somebody else and you go to a counter and they check you in, a different group of people. And then when you've checked yourself in, somebody takes the baggage, somebody takes you to the VIP lounge, and you've got that privilege. Somebody boards you, somebody distributes the peanuts within the airplane, somebody else is driving the airplane, somebody else has groomed the airplane to get off the ground, somebody else receives you, somebody else publicizes it, somebody else is driving the airplane. This is what's called modularity. The whole success of the Western world is based on the division of labor apart from the family, on merits. You know, you talk about Luis Alberto Moreno, and if this were the IDB were a family, you'd say he can't lead the IDB, he's too young. And that's what actually happens in family. The people are too young. Father's got to run it, grandfather's got to run it. So when you keep people in their families for cultural reasons, you're actually forbidding them to create a separate structure, one that's separate from the family. This doesn't mean you don't have families. This doesn't mean you don't have tribes. It's that you've got a special zone where hierarchies are organized according to efficiency, according to merit, according to profitability. That is something the great majority of Latin Americans don't have. You go and you see a Peruvian microempresario, and you say, who runs the place? And a Peruvian comes up with a big mustache and says, I run the place. But when you look at his wife and you see how she's looking at him, you realize she runs the place. And when you really look at the mother-in-law, maybe she's running the place. In the United States, there is absolutely no doubt who runs the place. You know who runs American Airlines. You know when you come in through migrations of the United States that even if we all know George Bush and we know Bill Clinton, it doesn't really matter. It's that guy who's called Garcia who's going to seal your passport, who's going to decide whether you get in or not. That 75% of Latin America doesn't have, 75% of China doesn't have, and 90% of India doesn't have. And nobody's going to tell me that China's on its way now easy to prosperity, nor India. The statistics using our method have just come out in India. 90% of Indian males work in the informal sector, and 93% of females work in the informal sector. And everything you read about information technology takes place among 2%. How do you think they're going to end up? Do you think it's going to be any different than Venezuela or Bolivia or the way Peru's going now? It's not going to be any different. There will come a time when the contradictions of class society, as Marx would have called them, will come and will take place. The next thing that happens in one of these microenterprises is, how do you issue shares? Can in Mexico una persona física con actividad empresarial issue shares? No. Can in Peru una compañía unipersonal, which are about 90% of all enterprises in Peru, issue shares? No. Then how are you going to capture investment? How am I going to tell my friend Carlos Slim, I would like you to invest with me, but I have no property rights to give you my enterprise? Hey, I'm an old friend. How are you going to get people to invest if you can't issue shares? And all those microempresarios and all those small enterprises, as lovely as they are, as well as they fit into color photographs in any bank's brochure, do not have the capacity to get investment. Like I repeat, since they own assets, because as you will see also with this information, all these people that are excluded in Latin America have over $1 trillion, $1.2 trillion that we've been able to define. They may be more, they may be less. This is preliminary. All those assets cannot be used to guarantee anything, and that's why we call them dead capital, whether it's credit or whether it's investment. As a matter of fact, only 6% of Mexicans can, only 3% of Peruvians can. They also don't have asset shielding, which means if I get together with Don Terry, and I get together with Carlos Slim, and we form, the three of us, a company, asset shielding means that when we've all contributed our capital to it, we can't withdraw it unless through specific bankruptcy procedures, liquidaciones. What if one of us wants to go away? He's got to talk to everybody else, or he's got shares. So we don't care if he goes away. He can sell his shares under conditions established by contract. The important thing is that the capital, the accumulation of possible growth, the potential, the machine that keeps energy going inside a company stays in place because all assets are shielded by law. That doesn't happen among the small entrepreneurs of Latin America. There's no asset shielding. You put your money in, you take it out whenever you want to. You didn't put money, you put in a couple of horses. You put in a machine, you put in a taxi. You can bring it and take it out whenever you want. No society can capitalize that way. None of them have limited liability. So all the enterprises that you're seeing here as being extra legal, and I'm saying 92% of them, they have no limited liability. What does limited liability mean? It means that I, who invest in a company or do any action, I am capable of singling out what my ability will be. It is limited to the money I've put in. It does not include my house. It does not include my machines. It does not include my wife's sewing machine. I limited the liability. This is good because I am able to separate what I need to survive, what I need to put my kids through school with, from what I'm putting in the business. And from the point of view of he who invests, or he who buys from me, or he who's selling to me, they know what I can risk and I cannot risk. I repeat, 92% of all the Latin Americans, from Argentina to Haiti, have no limited liability. So it's not enough to say, hey, we're all in business. We're all doing it our different cultural way. If you don't have the legal tools, you do not participate in globalization, you do not participate in tratados de libre comercio, but worse than that, you do not participate outside your neighborhood. The other day, I was about to travel, and my secretary, who was trying to modernize me all the time, said, instead of taking a big address book, you should put everything in your pilot, all your addresses. But I got a problem. All your agendas have got about 4,000 names that you've accumulated since the age of 25 or 26. I can't put 4,000. The memory only picks up 2,500. So I said, isn't that interesting for a little historical exercise? What we're going to do is you give them to me in a printout, and I will checklist those that should remain in the 2,500 in the pilot so I can consult with it. And the exercise proved to be not only good in the terms that it brought back old memories, but in the sense that it also brought back no memories. There were a lot of people I didn't remember why they were there. So as I checked, I found out that I only remembered, it could be that I'm getting old, and maybe somebody with a younger age can give you a different story, that I only remembered 2,300 names. Then I checked with some anthropologists and found out that nobody actually remembers more than 2,500 people. That's basically what we remember. So, as the Cardinal was telling us, we may all be brothers and sisters in this world, but if we do not have documents, whether they be passports or business association records, to touch with each other, we cannot identify anybody else. Our identity memories don't go beyond 2,500 people, which are the people who you recognize by their eyes, their smile, the amount of hair they've got, how they walk, the gait. This is how you recognize these people. But when I had to come into the United States here now, and they said, who are you? And I said, well, I'm Hernando de Soto. I'm the son of Alberto Soto Lajara, Rosa Polar, who actually came from Jaén. Rosa Polar actually came from Italy. One came through Moquegua, the other came from Arequipa. And it's very strange because they had a very big family. I've got about 56 cousins. He said at a certain moment, will you just show me your passport? And all of a sudden, I was an identity that was recognized. There is identity by acquaintance, how you get to meet somebody, and there's identity by description. Those were the words of Bertrand Russell. And the world and the market economy runs by description. And 75% of the people in Latin America, according to our first review of 12 countries, do not have identity by description. So to begin with, they can't even sell nationally. And when the TLC comes into place in Peru, it's 25 that will be able to come in. And if they come in through companies, it will be 8%. So identity is not only something for poets, it's also the document that gets us into the global marketplace. Finally, you will see in this brochure in front of you, brochure, in this fact sheet, this last part, which is called The Extra-Legal Economy Has Its Own Institutional Instruments. We've been away from Latin America, my institute and I, for a good time now, because most of our contracts came in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. But wherever we've gone, it's a fascinating thing about that majority, and it is that they've already begun structuring themselves. If the government hasn't helped them, they've started structuring themselves alone. So for example, in Tanzania, where we're working, first with President Mkapa, now with President Kikwete, we read, first of all, everything there was to read to it. We read all the anthropologists, heard how all the tribes operate. And then we went and said, okay, how much square miles do the tribes run? And we still haven't found a square mile. We just haven't. What we have found is that Tanzanians, organized in different forms, as families, as individuals, as groups of friends, have actually partitioned the land. As a matter of fact, probably the politicians that came in the 1960s pretty much did away with the political and economic power of the tribes, which you would imagine is what any nation that starts getting organized does. So it doesn't mean that tribes aren't there, it doesn't mean that families aren't there, it's just that we didn't see them. We also looked for another thing. We looked for a cow or a bull in all of Tanzania, the 26 districts, that didn't have a brand on it, and we weren't able to find it. Now what we did find is documents. Very primary documents, but pretty much like the ones with which the Roman law was born in Europe over 2,400 years ago. There are documents at the local level or the use of different official levels that don't actually have the authority to give the documents, but that people have given belief and coherence to. And every asset that we have found, for example, in Lima, where we've also done this survey, has got a piece of paper to it. In fact, in parts of Lima, we have even found up to 20 illegal papers per parcel. So there is no lack of paper. What you got to find out is which of these papers actually rules, which of these papers gives you value. And if you go back to European history, if you go back to Japanese history, if you go back to the history of Europe, that's the way the law started. You didn't start off by throwing from the top a computer system that told everybody what the rules were. If you have 75% of the economy that's out the system, you first go out and find out what it is that they respect, what it is that they obey, how it is that they make their transactions, and then you organize that so that it can be done on a massive scale. When the United States wanted to bring in one law, the Unified Commercial Code, nobody from Washington said this is the law. To create the Unified Commercial Code, they brought all the states together, found out the common denominators, and worked it in. When the European Economic Community decided that at, of course, a multinational level, they wanted to create one law for steel, one law for coal, one law for business, one law for real estate, one law for mortgages, to start creating an economic community, they started a process called the acquis communautaire, which consisted in looking at the laws that were actually working and combing them towards the direction of one law. And to say, I don't see how Latin America or even China can get away from that. The extra-legal sector, that majority, is already getting organized.